Welcome to Podkey Fantasy Football, where today's draft edges come with more caveats than hype. A lot of fantasy advice sounds clean, right up until you ask what has to be true for it to work. That's really the theme here. Aging backs, injury discounts, ADP signals, and all the spots where the market might be right for reasons people don't want to hear. The running back age cliff is real enough that we shouldn't talk around it. Aaron Jones, James Conner, Alvin Kamara, Kareem Hunt. Those are the reminders that once backs get into their early 30s, the failure mode can be sudden. And the hard part is the warning signs are often subtle until they're not. Efficiency can look stable, role can look stable, and then the body just stops cashing the same checks. Derrick Henry is the perfect tension case. Since 2018, the floor has been absurd 15 or more games, 215 or more carries, 1,059 or more rushing yards, 12 or more touchdowns every season. So if somebody says Henry is safer than most backs, there's evidence for that. If somebody says a 32-year-old power back is one awkward landing away from a cliff, there's evidence for that too. The key is not pretending durability in the past erases age-related fragility in the future. It just means the bet is on an unusually strong outlier. Workload still pays, which is why the David Montgomery case is interesting. If Houston really gives him that familiar 15 to 16 carries per game, and the offensive line additions actually stabilize things with Wyatt Teller, Braden Smith, and Keelan Rutledge, the fantasy math gets simple fast. Volume plus red zone chances plus favorable game script can make a back valuable even without explosive efficiency. But there's a trade-off here. Volume backs can be priced correctly by the market because their path is obvious and their ceiling is capped unless the offense hums. That's why the mid-round range matters so much. Josh Jacobs, Kyron Williams, Breece Hall, Javonte Williams in that ADP 30 to 32 neighborhood is where roster construction starts interacting with your risk tolerance. Then you get the higher variance names. Tank Bigsby's 5.9 yards per carry jumps off the page, but limited touch efficiency is exactly where people overstate certainty. Kenneth Walker in a lead role under Andy Reid sounds like the kind of sentence that can launch a player up boards, but the part that matters is whether the lead role is truly secure. When role is stable, ceiling bets make sense. When role is fuzzy, the market usually isn't underreacting, it's pricing the uncertainty. The no one pick gets talked about like a privilege, but recent fantasy results say it can just be expensive pressure. If the top PPR running back over the last 5 seasons has finished anywhere from RB1 to RB9, then the first pick is not some automatic edge, it's just first crack at the hardest pricing decision. That's why slot-specific strategy makes sense. Early picks can justify locking in a top back, and often a second running back in rounds 2 or 3, because you're leaning into positional scarcity before the board thins. Middle picks, 5 through 7, have more room to go receiver heavy because elite wideout stability can be easier to bank than running back health. Late first-round drafters still have flexibility. You can take an RB if the board gives you one, then pivot into elite receiver strength. The bigger point is draft slot changes the opportunity cost of every decision. A good strategy at 1.02 can be a bad one at 1.10. Quarterback is one of the cleaner strategic calls here. Don't force it early. If 2026 gives you real depth, then spending premium capital on a quarterback is less about safety and more about paying up for comfort. Jared Goff is the example of what waiting can buy you. 4 straight seasons at 267.7 passing yards and 1.9 passing touchdowns per game, only 7 0-touchdown games in that span, and an ADP around QB 16 at 125 overall. That profile isn't glamorous, but it's stable enough that the risk of waiting is manageable. And if you do wait, pairing 2 later quarterbacks for matchup play can make more sense than paying up for one name. Tight end is trickier because depth isn't the same as usefulness. Travis Kelce sounds boring now, and boring can be good if what you're buying is weekly floor, 7 to 9 fantasy points per game, steady targets, still top 20 in yards per route. What's changed is the upside case. You're probably not paying for the old nuclear version anymore. The more actionable note is tier management. Don't drift past that second tier and tell yourself you'll solve it later. Tyler Warren's rookie line of 70 catches and about 800 yards, plus a 150 target ceiling, is the sort of profile that keeps you out of the ugly part of the position. Once the board falls into boom or bust bets like Kyle Pitts or health-dependent bets like George Kittle, you're mostly hoping to guess right week to week. Receiver strategy here is pretty coherent. Build depth. You can actually start. Later round receivers are exciting in theory, but in practice a lot of them become bench clutter, which is why a self-starting WR room matters. Target share is one of the better ways to separate real opportunity from generic upside talk. McMillan posting a 25.4% target share and 30.7% of Panthers receiving yards as a rookie tells you the floor is already meaningful. If a new coordinator moves him into a larger slot role, the ceiling argument gets stronger. But that part is still conditional, because scheme changes can elevate usage or just rearrange buzzwords. Terry McLaurin is another good example of fact versus projection. The facts are durable. Never fewer than 117 targets, never fewer than 1,000 yards, elite route efficiency with strong yards per route and first downs per route marks. The projection is that if Stephon Diggs is absent, his target share could push into the 25 to 26% range. That projection holds up better than a lot of camp hype because it's built on an already stable workload, not a totally new role appearing from nowhere. Chris Olave fits the same principle from a different angle. The Saints giving him 4 years and $132 million with $90 million guaranteed through 2030 is a meaningful signal. Teams do not hand out that kind of money casually, and contracts are often cleaner clues to planned usage than coach speak. It doesn't erase health concerns, but it does support the idea that his WR14 type pricing still has runway if New Orleans leans pass-heavy. The injury stance in this set of takes is blunt and mostly defensible. Don't draft into injuries before health is proven. That can sound overly rigid until you look at the examples. Ricky Pearsall's PCL reconstruction is not a cute buy-the-dip situation. It effectively ends the season and crushes short-term fantasy value. Tank Dell's multi-ligament knee damage, ACL, MCL, LCL, meniscus, is the kind of injury where a positive listing can still hide a very unclear functional timeline. The reason to be strict early in drafts is that uncertain recoveries don't just lower ceiling, they contaminate roster flexibility. That said, buy low logic still exists when the discount finally becomes large enough. Alec Pierce falling into the mid-80s after ankle surgery, and a PUP listing is at least a real conversation if he returns healthy, because at that cost you're no longer paying for best-case assumptions. Committee risk deserves the same discipline. When a team publicly talks committee and lists another back as RB1, like with Jeremiah Love, that is actionable information, not background noise. Fantasy managers love to dismiss committee language as smokescreen until the split workload is sitting in their lineup. Rookie hype is not a substitute for a feature role. One of the smartest points here has nothing to do with player takes and everything to do with process. Track exposure and track fees. Adam Leviton's 2,000 socks of pure salt loss from Ricky Pearsall overexposure, 15.9% exposure and 25.2% of fees across 69 solver drafts is funny until it's your own portfolio. Exposure management matters because being right on a player and being overexposed to a fragile thesis are not the same thing. ADP works the same way. It's a market signal, not a command. You need it because it tells you cost, opponent behavior, and how likely a player is to come back around. But if you follow it mechanically, you're outsourcing your edge. The right use of ADP is strategic. Respect the price, understand the room, and deviate when your board gives you a reason. A few player-specific notes tie the whole episode together. Quinshawn Judkins looks like a sensible stash because the underlying usage before injury, 19.2 touches per game from weeks 3 through 15, plus pass protection, creates a path to relevance if Cleveland's line improves. The limitation is clear too. Only 16 targets in 5 games means the receiving ceiling may lag, so the appeal is more useful depth than instant breakout. Tony Pollard is the opposite kind of conversation. At 29, with a middling line and a pass-first quarterback and coordinator setup, the market may be charging a fair price for a player who simply doesn't have many outs to beat it. Basil Tootin has the fun traits, 4.28 speed and strong inside the 5 success, but traits only matter if touches stabilize. And Breece Hall remains a good reminder that talent and environment can move in opposite directions. Elite efficiency and receiving involvement are there, but offensive context can still cap the ceiling. A couple of off-field notes are worth mentioning. Fantasy life, consolidating columns, rankings, and shows onto one platform, sounds boring in the best way. Consistency and access matter, especially when your audience is trying to compare signals instead of chasing scattered takes. The Listener League 2026 idea also gets at something fantasy. People forget, good leagues are not just skill contests, they're social spaces, so prioritizing personality and good vibes is actually good league design. And the AI image manipulation discussion is more serious than it might sound. Subtle edits, like changing body shape or hairlines without obvious disclosure, can distort how people see real athletes and co-workers alike. The technology makes small lies cheap, which is exactly why clear norms against that kind of manipulation matter. That's the board for today. Chase roles, respect injuries, and make the market prove it. Thanks for listening to Podkey Fantasy Football. This episode was generated by Podkey. Create your own at podkey.fm.